How many of y'all were at the keynote yesterday? Just curious. Cool. Something that super resonated for me at the keynote was this notion of first-gen students and breaking through this barrier of getting into college, period, and like how do we reach these outsider communities, which is a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. But I think I also just want to situate myself for a moment in that. At the last minute, I wrote down that I'm California College of the Arts class of 2014 for my master's degree because I'm not currently at an AICAD institution. I'm not being paid by my institution to be here. This is all out of pocket. And the research that I'm doing is my really expensive hobby. So in terms of like outsider notions, I'm very much on the outside of this little academia bubble, but I'm also like a person that weaves in and out of it. So I think you're going to see this thread as I go through the presentation today. I'm super interested in my relationship to academia, academia's relationship to me, and then how these two entities can work together. So here we go. This is the third iteration of this presentation. In 2023, I've presented this in a number of different contexts, from queer studies symposia to I went to a student shop managers symposium over in July. So this is the like newly revamped for this audience version of this. So hello, my name is Amanda Simons. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I teach tool literacy programs at the STEAM studio of the University of North Carolina, Asheville. And in September of last year, we were granted funding to make our shop more accessible. So we purchased these lovely adjustable height tables as part of that grant. And these tables are really great because they're robust and they have this hand crank, so we can change the height of them. In this position, they're about 30 inches, and then we can crank them up so that they're like almost my chin height, which is really nice. Since then, I've been working with a consultant who uses a wheelchair to make our curriculum more universally accessible. So these tables have been a great tool because they've allowed me to learn so much about what's possible in our shop and what's possible in our curriculum, and then also what's not possible. But there are a couple of problems with these tables, which I'm going to refer to as the ironic tables from henceforth. The first problem is how much they weigh. These are really robust $1,700 tables that weigh 173 pounds, which means that I cannot pick it up to move it. And the way they're designed doesn't allow me to get a good hook underneath of it to actually pick them up and move them around the space and make our shop more accessible. So I've been sort of struggling when I have to reconfigure the space as an able-bodied person. Totally unrelated to my job, 9 months ago I had major surgery and I was placed on a 2-month lifting restriction. So I've been in physical therapy since then, and I've had to relearn how to move my body so that I don't hurt myself. And yet the ironic tables, part of my day job is that I have to move these tables to make my curriculum and my space more physically accessible for people with special needs. Me, right? So to solve this problem, my physical therapist was like, I'll write you a note. I'll write you a note so you don't have to move the tables, which is great. But I know how this goes. I'm going to get this note, and I'm going to take my note to HR. HR is going to go to my boss. My boss is going to come back to me. And then my job is going to be to figure out how to provide the accommodation for myself, right? Because this is ironically part of my job. And sometimes this is totally fine. In the instance where someone needs an accommodation like an interpreter, or someone needs a different office chair, or somebody needs something simple, this is generally how the system works, and that's totally fine and it works. And then there are some places where this falls apart. So let's reframe this for a moment. You have a student with an accommodations letter who takes the accommodations letter to the student support office. The student support office comes to the instructor. It says the student has an accommodation. The instructor sometimes then has to go back to the student and be like, can you clarify what this note says? Because I don't get it. That means the student then has to go back to the support office sometimes and be like, I thought this was an easy fix. I need an accommodation. Why am I not getting it? And then if you're in a 3D design class, sometimes now you're involving the shop staff, you're involving student workers or like shop technicians. Then the shop technicians then have to go back to the student or maybe to the support office to get clarification, and there's all these complexities in higher ed with FERPA, right? Because there's things that we can and cannot say, and yet we're trying to provide an accommodation for someone who needs a thing. So this is never a straight line. This is never a straight line. So eventually we get, student might have to go back to the support office. Eventually we get to the accommodation. Meanwhile, you're mid-semester. How many of you all have been in this position, just out of curiosity? Yeah, it's a time suck. It's a time suck, it's a people suck, and it sucks for the student in a lot of ways. So I want to start here because sometimes these letters mean nothing. Sometimes they put a lot of pressure on staff and faculty who are not necessarily trained in ADA compliance or trained to engineer a solution if it's a physical solution. And to tie this back to this conference, if we think about freedoms, often we're thinking about freedoms in terms of being granted by law. So I have the freedom to go vote because the law says women can vote now. We have the freedom to get accommodations because ADA says by law that the institution has to provide accommodations. So I'm wondering if we can start chipping away at this, and if we can start thinking of freedom as not something that's given, but freedom that's something that's there at the beginning so that we can circumvent the need for this. So this is where my talk starts. I want to back up. This environment that we're in is designed using average measurements. So this is data that's been collected by the US military and the automobile safety industry, and it's put into databases that are used by industrial designers. And from there, objects and machines are designed to fit average bodies and make work easier or safer. I'm basically just talking about ergonomics. And before I dive super deep into this, I want to go on a brief tangent because last month, September. No, 2 months ago. Sorry, it's November now. In September, this data was recently used to create the first crash test dummy that was modeled after a female body. And when I read this, I said, well, how long have crash test dummies been around? I want to know this information. So 74 years, if you're curious. Crash test dummies have been used for 74 years, and here we are in 2023, and we're finally using female measurements. Because seatbelts have been killing or injuring women because they hit in the wrong spot, okay? So finally we've arrived where the automobile safety industry is using this data for a different audience than perceived. So tangent over, let's go back to ergonomics. So this data is used by designers to make objects safer and easier to use. So I want you all to take inventory of where you're sitting right now in these chairs. Do your feet touch the floor? Is your butt comfortable? No, probably not. Where does it hit on your back, right? Can you are you gonna get really uncomfortable talking to me or sitting here and listening for the next 40 minutes? So when we think about this, the design industry is determining, do you belong to these objects or do you not? Do you belong to these objects? Do you not? So I want to introduce myself a little bit further. Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm a white, queer, gender non-conforming, neurodiverse person who is assigned female at birth. I have sensory sensitivity, and I also have a condition recognized by the ADA as a disability. I'm 5'4", and I weigh 170 pounds. When I sit in a standard chair, my feet don't touch the ground, and that's just how my body is designed. All of these facts are going to become important later. So I manage this program at UNCA. We offer classes in welding, woodworking, and digital tools for kids as young as 8, and also for adult learners of all ages and experience levels, not necessarily connected to the college. And I personally am obsessed with my body's relationship to the physical world. Over the last decade, I've taught in and I've also managed studio spaces for a variety of organizations, from grassroots initiatives to higher ed to K-12 to internationally famous project-based experimental learning giants. In this work, I've been focused on non-traditional students. So women, older people, English language learners, neurodiverse populations, folks with physical differences, trans and non-binary people, and not because this field is necessarily flooded with different types of people, but because I've specifically sought out those audiences. So as we all know, but we aren't necessarily talking enough about, this field of making is dominated by white, able-bodied, upper middle class, educated cis men. And in my opinion, this domination stems from a long history of both metal and woodworking craft traditions that are steeped in apprenticeship-based models. So think blacksmithing, construction, and more recently digital tools and their reliance on technology access. Statistically speaking, this problem of diversity, equity, and inclusion in spaces like this is a hot button topic that many people have been trying to solve from a variety of different angles. And as educators in this field, we're always asking, how do we welcome and retain different types of people in spaces designed for making and tool use? So not just women, but queer people, BIPOC folks, neurodivergent people, and then in where I'm at, specifically thinkers outside of the field of engineering. We have a lot of engineers in my shop. So this is a really multifaceted, complex issue of race, class, gender, access. It's got all these things, and I'm not going to solve any of that for you today. I'm very sorry. What I am going to do is present you a different way of approaching this problem and hopefully give you some tools to take home that you can implement immediately in your spaces if you're managing a space. So I want to propose that by examining ways in which we approach educating third graders, we can create more inclusive spaces for making. And I want to pause here because before I continue, here's a few disclaimers. I'm about to talk about kids using tools, and as it's been pointed out in a previous presentation, yes, the user manuals say that kids shouldn't be using the tools. Yes. Teaching the kids how to use the tools, yes, that's against the user manuals. And the user manuals generally provide not much explanation beyond legal considerations, right? This is a line for legal purposes, but paradoxically, my job is to teach minors how to safely use tools. So like the female crash test dummy, this industry hasn't actually caught up to the user base, right, when they're manufacturing these products. So I am part of this change, and let's start by talking about third graders. Third graders, they have a complex queer relationship to power tools. Power tools that you can purchase in the United States are designed for people who the companies believe will use their product. So if we go back to ergonomics, they're using body measurements of white people who were assigned male at birth, who are around 5'8" and weigh 172 pounds. and have hand dexterity. Yeah, they're able-bodied folks. By contrast, here's our average third grader. Average third grader is around 9 years old. They're a little over 4 feet tall, and they weigh only 62 pounds. If you use power tools before, we know that the safe use of power tools relies on a specific mathematical relationship between your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist, and your hand. It relies on your height relative to the height of the table that you're working at. It also relies on your upper body strength relative to the tool's weight. So if I'm over 16 inches shorter than the intended user of a tool, every variable in that mathematical equation changes. Where I hold the tool, where my strength and leverage comes from, and also where my eyes are in relation to my workpiece. If I'm 9 years old, the weight of a tool like a jigsaw is actually at the upper limit of my safe carrying and lifting ability, which is about 11% of our body weight. So this is the adult equivalent of trying to carry 3 of these tools, or carrying around 2 gallons of milk. When tools are designed for a specific body, it means that anyone that doesn't fit that specification has to adjust to their has to adjust their relationship to the tool. So this makes work more complicated, more difficult, and in some cases less safe. Under this logic, just like the kids, power tools weren't designed for me to safely use either. And I'm a biological woman with a decade of shop management experience. They're not designed for me to safely use. So this issue of makerspace diversity is also an issue of physical design in a lot of ways. When functional objects are designed with a specific body in mind, these objects essentially also exclude a whole other category of bodies. And if we were to dive into gender and identity theory, Judith Butler has a lot to say about this, Sarah Ahmed has a lot to say about this, but of note here today, designed objects are telling the story of who has a correct body and also who has an incorrect body. Work is easier for some, work is hard for others. So if tools used in the construction industry are designed for my body, I might be more likely to work construction. And teaching third graders means adjusting teaching to their body size. So essentially, I am providing accommodations through my workday, just as part of my everyday experience with these folks. Work surfaces have to be shorter. I have to help push or steer the tool. Work periods are shorter because this is an intense athletic event, and this tool, again, is not designed for this body. This physical mismatch between tool and person might limit learning and experience, and this is only one of the ways that this field is difficult and unwelcoming for differently shaped people. So think people with different smaller bodies, people in wheelchairs or with other physical differences, or even older individuals. So let's take this one step further, and I also want to talk about neurodiversity. There's actually a lot to be learned from third graders if we want to make our spaces more welcoming. Developmentally speaking, third graders are in a learning transition. They're going from looking at pictures to now learning more about words. And by that I mean they probably already know how to read a lot of words, but what they're doing developmentally is connecting from like, this is a mouse, this is a water bottle, to like, how can I read a sentence and have it provide me instruction or information beyond just the recognition of the word and object as one thing. So educational tools and environments are designed with this milestone in mind. Let's all think back to third grade for a second. Third grade books have illustrations to assist with providing context clues. Assignments might revolve around spotting the difference between a picture and a word. And while the focus is on literacy, there are still many other visual aids in the educational environment to assist these kids with this transition. And this means that elementary classrooms are often very conducive to visual learners and also folks who appreciate patterns. So colors might indicate groupings, symbols accompany words. We might be able to see the thing and the word together at the same time. In these classrooms, closed doors or drawers might signal that something is off limits to students, while bookshelves and open cabinetry invite tactile exploration. And as we transition out of third grade, this blended approach to classroom design is often abandoned. So people who graduated third grade are now supposed to understand certain social conventions. I'm supposed to ask if I can touch something before I do. I'm supposed to remember how to use something after hearing someone provide verbal instructions. I'm supposed to hold my body a certain way to pay attention. I'm expected to know that I should be looking around and reading literal signs before going and doing a thing. So if I have a brain that already has to work harder to do these assumed social conventions, learning in a higher ed environment where environmental accommodations are not already present is going to be harder for me. So let's dig into that a little bit more. When I'm learning in a shop, I'm learning a new vocabulary, I'm learning new sequences, I'm learning new ways of moving my body. Verbal instruction, literal labeling systems, and assumed social conventions don't always work for neurodivergent people, for visual learners, for English language learners, for people with anxiety, and also just for folks inhabiting a space that they know wasn't designed for them. So like a third grade classroom, I want to propose that the shop environment or studio space should be designed from the very beginning to accommodate all users. Great. Lofty goal, right? Lofty proposal. So then what? Let's think back to higher education and the accommodations proposal that I presented in the beginning. We're often presenting or being provided accommodations requests because someone moves or thinks differently than normal. This is a reaction to a request. So when we rely on the person who needs accommodations to self-identify, we're also asking them to be brave enough to stand there and say, I am different and I need help. This is a system that's assuming a baseline of normal, and it's assuming that everyone has the bravery and energy to self-identify when they're not normal, okay? As shop staff or as faculty, our job is to make many different types of people feel comfortable, safe, seen, heard in our spaces. And in order to do that, we need to expand this definition of normal and expand who our shops were designed for. So with a few adjustments, from the very beginning, we can work toward universal design that captures more learners from the beginning without needing to provide adjustments, accommodations, or interventions later. So let's start that journey now. This is where it starts. It starts with, unfortunately, staff and faculty doing a little bit of back-end homework because it's not always part of our positions to be educated on this from the forefront. So I want to give you some resources if this is something that you're interested in. We're not ADA compliance officers. We're not necessarily trained on ADA or inclusive teaching strategies. So if you're faculty or if you're staff administration, this may look differently for you in your role. I'm going to present a bunch of things that I hope is helpful for everybody, but write down and take home what you need. So I want to start here. This is the book that I was referencing in the beginning. This is The Measure of Man and Woman Factors in Human Design. This is a great technical resource. Of note here is that it was originally published in 1959 and it was revised in 1993 to add the metrics of women. Okay, so originally in the 1950s it was all men. This version, the newer version, has women, children, folks in wheelchairs, older individuals. It's got all of the body schematics, so it's a really great source if you like to start with the data and then move forward. Two more resources. Accessible America is a good resource for understanding how people with physical disabilities are often excluded from design considerations in buildings. I mean, we could just walk down the hallway and see this, right? I had to find the bathroom earlier. In order to go to the bathroom, I have to walk down a half flight of stairs or take the elevator. Okay, so ADA, even though it's a law, right, it's the law that's providing the freedom, there's a lot of retrofitting that happens because designers aren't considering this from the beginning. Visual thinking, this is a resource that talks about how visual thinkers have been marginalized in higher education since the introduction of standardized testing in the 1990s. So this is a funny thing to present to a group of art folks, right? Because you probably have a ton of visual thinkers in your classrooms, in your schools, but think about how many of them didn't make it to the college application because the standardized testing, the way it's presented, is not geared toward people who think visually, right? It's people who think literally. So we already have this barrier in place. So this is a really interesting book that specifically talks about that. I found it very helpful. The Job Accommodations Network is a great resource. This is a searchable database that you can go in and just learn about different types of conditions that someone might have, and it'll give you some concrete ways to adjust. This is specifically for employers, but you can adjust this to the students as well. You can look up depression, and it'll give you a bunch of accommodations if you're an employer that you could provide to your employee if they come to you and say, I have depression and I'm struggling. So this is a more forward-thinking way of addressing accommodations from the very beginning instead of relying on the person to give you a letter. These are two resources that are great about neurodiversity. Unmasking Autism is a wonderful resource. This is the hot book for folks that are learning about autism right now. Autistic people do a lot to try to appear normal, and this can prevent them from being diagnosed as being autistic, and thus be a barrier to even having an accommodations letter at all. So this book starts to unravel that and talks about the process of unmasking. So like if you self-identify as autistic, what are the ways that you might be hiding that, and what can you do to like back up? Divergent Mind, this was a really great book. It specifically addresses how work and school isn't made for neurodivergent people from the very beginning. And if you identify as neurodivergent, it gives you some concrete examples of things that you can ask for in school or in work that might make it easier for you, or things that you can just do on a day-to-day basis to change your relationship to those places. This is where my research has sort of landed right now. Universal Design for Learning in the Classroom. CAS.org is the website partner to this book. The website has a ton of information on it. When we hear Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, in an educational context, often this is just paired with technology assist. So this got hot during the pandemic, where we're talking about doing synchronous, asynchronous video, right, all the things to accommodate a larger number of people, but it's actually so much more than that. And I want to pause on this and actually kind of dig into this a little bit, because while this is specifically for curricular design, this also applies to designing spaces, designing classrooms, and things outside of that. So on CAS.org, there's a really great resource that gives you, it's basically a 9-block rubric where you can go through your curriculum and sort of check to make sure that you're reaching the broadest number of people. So I just want to go through this a little bit more here and highlight some of this. So upon reading this, like, here are some of the questions that seemed relevant to this particular presentation. Are there ways to provide choice and autonomy in your curriculum or in your shop space? Are there multiple ways that a student can hear or experience information? Is there a way that a student can participate with their body rather than maybe writing or producing a thing? Can a beginner and also an expert in the subject participate in a lesson for a sustained period of time? So you may present something that, like, some people are like, this is too easy, I'm going to be done with it, while other people in the room might be struggling, right? Can you back up and redesign your lessons so that everybody is engaged for the same amount of time? Have you defined the vocabulary and also provided a symbol that might represent that word? That's a good way of thinking about this. Could an English language learner understand your lesson? Are there different ways to complete the lesson? For example, could I write a paragraph, or could I make an illustration to demonstrate my understanding of the learning? Can a student that needs to fidget, needs noise reduction, needs multiple breaks, needs insert accommodation here, complete the lesson without asking for special accommodation? Are there multiple ways to demonstrate learning? Writing, drawing, doing. Can a student comfortably push against the boundaries of an assignment? In art, we probably get this a lot. I definitely get this a lot from my students. They're like, okay, but could I do it this way? Could I do it this way? Could I do it this way? Have you provided an open door for people to be able to do that if they need to be able to do that? Right? Is that an expectation in the beginning? And have you provided multiple frameworks for goal setting, project management, task completion? Have you given your students multiple ways to develop their own toolbox so that they can project management throughout the duration of the assignment or whatever it is? Not every assignment is going to check all these boxes. Not every curriculum is going to check all these boxes, not at first. But the CAS.org website and also the book talks about, okay, can I start here? Can I expand my audience through going through this rubric? And then after I've done the lesson, after I've delivered the information, can I sit down and be like, okay, who didn't I reach? And what can I change next time to make sure when that student is back in my classroom, I reach them from the very beginning? Great. I'm going to give you some tools. I'm just going to give you some tools. These are some things that you can do right now if you don't want to go into the homework and you don't want to, whatever. Here we go. Really easy things. I want you to start by thinking about labels in your space, and are there ways that you can make your labeling systems more inclusive? So makerspace people, we love labels. We love labeling all the things in the drawers, and sometimes these literal labels aren't very helpful. For English language learners or dyslexic people, even people learning new vocabulary, sometimes these labels mean absolutely nothing. For visual learners, I might not see the words at all. I might look at this and it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. So is there a way that symbols, color coding, and vocabulary can exist together? Or, can we group these things so that they make sense? Multiple approaches are going to reach more people. Here's another example of what that might look like. Also, is there a way that you can eliminate words altogether? Here's a resource. Nounproject.com is a really great database for finding symbols and to supplement your labeling system. So this is a database that you can download symbols. They're working to create a symbol for every noun in the English language, and they're collaborating with designers, so this database is ever changing. There's always a new set of things that you can go in there, download. Can you make storage more intentional is my next proposal. So when I look at these drawers, I understand them as not for me. So if I'm in a shop space and I need to find a screwdriver, my go-to is going to be to find the shop manager and ask where the screwdriver is instead of helping myself. So is there a way that we can redo this? Can we open up the cabinetry? Can we display the tools and inclusively label them so that I'm invited to help myself? And if we compare these two things side by side, this one's absolutely more inviting, and this is absolutely more confusing. Okay, so are there ways that we can just do this in our classrooms? And what this does also is take some of the pressure off the staff and faculty to be the constant question answerer. Where's the screwdriver? I don't know, go look. Go look on the wall. The screwdriver's on the wall. Are there other ways that you can let the environment be the teacher? So where do the safety glasses live? They live on the wall. They're displayed next to the door when you walk in so that you understand to put them on before you walk into the space, and then you understand to take them off and put them back. And there doesn't have to be any discussion about that. It's just there. What does this tool do? How big are the holes that it makes? All the information is right there. Where do the chisels live? It's a little bit hard to see in the picture, but these are all custom routed out specific to the tool. So if a tool is missing and the student opens the drawer, they can understand where the tool goes back. Where do the drills go? How do you hang them up? Information's all there. Where does the person stand? So I'm proposing that we start thinking about these educational spaces as spaces that should be teaching the students and not necessarily as replications of construction sites that they might see in industry post-graduation. Next tip, can you create breaks from noise and don't solely rely on verbal instruction in a noisy room? This is more specific to woodshop, but this comes up all the time where we're demoing the table saw and then all of a sudden we turn the table saw on and then try to talk over the table saw. For folks who have noise sensitivity, have sound sensitivity, maybe have some other neurological considerations, this is a really terrible way to instruct tools. And I want to speak for myself just for a second. So as someone who has sensory processing sensitivity, I can stand here and I'm feeling the socks on my feet. I'm smelling what it smells like in the room. I see how terrible these overhead lights are. And I'm having to work harder to stand here in front of you because my brain isn't filtering that out automatically. You probably have students in your classroom who are experiencing a similar reality. And so creating another layer is a barrier to learning in a lot of ways. So I want to talk a little bit more about noise. Again, coming at this from a shop context, we have a lot of students that use noise-canceling headphones, and you probably have this in your classroom as well. It's not protecting your ears, right? Noise-canceling technology is sending another sound out into the world to try to cancel out this other sound. So it's actually doing more in terms of putting stuff into your ears than it would be if you put just headphones on. So for folks in shop spaces, this is a new thing that we have to educate students on. And we have to talk more about, are there alternatives to noise-canceling earplugs? Loop is a good brand. You can put them in and hear instruction, and it helps protect from some of the noise. If you're in a space where it's okay to listen to personal audio, AICAD actually makes noise protection headphones with Bluetooth capability. And then for folks outside of shop spaces, this is a good brand that doesn't provide noise protection, but it makes, in general, sounds less sharp. So if you have someone who's having a hard time paying attention, this might be a good alternative to the noise-canceling earphones because it's going to like bring the volume down just a little bit. Your question?
Well, I think maybe you answered it by sharp. You mean dB or treble?
Both. Both. It like brings it down just a little bit. Okay, and if you're in a shop space, we should be offering different options for people to protect their ears anyway. So often in shops, like this is the standard option, is just the soft, squishy earplugs, but I just want to remind everybody that everybody's ears are shaped differently. This doesn't work for everybody. So we offer 3 different options in my shop just so that people who are learning the tool for the first time can find out what's comfortable for them. Did you know they make us small safety glasses? They make safety glasses for smaller faces, not just for children. The small safety glasses that they sell on Amazon actually fit my face better than the standard wraparound glasses. So if you're in a position to make purchasing decisions for your institution, or you know somebody who is, they should be investing in some small safety glasses and maybe also some impact-rated goggles. Sometimes this is a better option for people with really fancy prescription eyewear because it's not like multiple stems hitting the side of your head. It's got a rubber band around it. Just a little bit better of an option. We should be offering height options for all different bodies. I hate this when the institution gets the money to provide the ADA compliant table and then it gets tucked in the corner and nobody's allowed to use it unless they're in a wheelchair. We should be bringing that out. That table is good for anybody. That table is good for anybody because you don't need to be in a wheelchair to need this sort of height accommodation. So if you're in a shop space, this is the first thing that I tell people when they start thinking about how to make their space more accessible and accommodating. Can you sit in an office chair and roll your butt around your shop? See how many things that you can't reach? Because these tools that we have in our 3D spaces are, again, designed for someone who's 5'8". So if you're shorter, this is a good check. And sometimes there are things that you can immediately change, right? Like if you have a joiner that you can lower the platform, if you have a miter saw that you can lower the platform, if you're able to do that in your shop space, that's an easy first fix. And then some of these things we can't quite fix yet, right? Because the manufacturers haven't caught up to thinking about this in terms of accessible bodies for everybody. But this is a good way to experience what it's like for a wheelchair user in a shop space. Just wheel yourself around and see if there's anything that you can fix immediately. I just gave you a bunch of stuff. It's probably not specific to your area, so I want you to collect data from your actual and target audiences, and this seems like a lot of work. This is a lot of work to actually do, but I want to pause here for a second and talk about the importance of this. I was managing the first year studios of California College of the Arts, and I did this for the first year of me working there. I just started data collecting just for the heck of it. And so I was collecting the number of instances that a tool was taken out of our wood shop and taken into the adjacent classroom. Which tool was it? Just to see how many things are being taken out of the classroom to use in another space. And what this data from a full academic year gave me was a reason to move the rulers, which were stored behind the table saw on the wall, and I put them over by the front door. And what this did was let people come in and grab a ruler without having to put themselves in a dangerous situation. I wouldn't have thought about that had I not collected this data. So this is the importance of this sort of data collection specific to your institution. In all of these things, and all of these tips and all these suggestions, this is the most important one. I want y'all to leave room for and learn from deviations. This image is a really good example. We have a clamp that was put back incorrectly. And as a studio manager, as a shop steward, this drives me crazy. Like, seeing this image drives me absolutely nuts. Why couldn't this person put this clamp back on the wall in the way that it was supposed to be put back? This is a moment that you can learn from. Not that the student can learn from, but that I can learn from. Is there a way for me to redesign this clamp hanging system so that the users feel invited to put it back a particular way? This is the fault of the system and not the fault of the person. I identify with this clamp, okay? I identify with this clamp. I'm a minority in this field. I'm constantly uncomfortable in shops. I have a queer relationship with the tools and with the environment. I have to adjust my way of being to fit into these spaces. And because I've experienced that queerness, I've learned so much about this field. Not every user is going to want to work hard in the way that I do to make themselves feel comfortable in a shop. Okay, so this is the heart of DEI initiatives, and it's also the heart of retention in your programs. So I want you to think about your shop space for just a second. Do you feel comfortable walking into your school's woodshop? If you don't, how might that motivate you to change that space? And if you do feel comfortable walking into your shop, are there ways that you could put yourself in the perspective of someone who doesn't feel comfortable and motivate yourself to make that change? So, essentially, what else could we learn if the statistical average experienced more queerness? What else could we learn if the folks who are the majority, the 5'8", the 172-pound able-bodied people, what if they experience more queerness? The answer is that we could learn so much more. So what I'm proposing is a universal call to rethink shop and educational space design. What if the tables became lower? What if the tools became lighter? What if a broader audience felt comfortable and took ownership in your space? And all of you have a crucial role in this journey because you're taking this information back to your home institutions. I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.